Hey guys, this is Valde from Moji here. Danish Counter-Strike is one hell of a drug, but so is Thorin's YouTube channel.
This is going to be another episode of Talk to Thorin, and my guest for this one is going to be Trace, who was a legendary 1.6 player and more recently has been a coach in CSGO. Let's actually just, obviously, of Astralis, let's just start there, right? Because the part that I actually find ridiculous is, it's true, if people go back and watch the Reflections interview we did a few years back, they will see you had like matured as a person, maybe a bit more cerebral as a player, etc., etc., etc. But the thing is, when I remember you, because obviously there's so many years of 1.6 are embedded in my brain, like, first of all, I remember back in the day, maybe you don't even know this, I used to have Danish players where when I would see them on the rise and you were in those like up and coming, third and fourth Danish teams where you go to the lands and people could see you had skills. Everyone who's international would say to, MTW or something like, get this guy, or when are you going to get that guy? And they would all go, get that guy. He is a rager and an arsehole. And then it was like, oh, okay. Like is there beef here? What's going on? Like, I always, you had the rep that you were a bit of a rager, or even when you were really good, you were pretty intense. You were the sort of guy, if you lost, devices is a bit, you might bang the table or be a bit annoyed that you dropped a 40 bomb and lost the game. How do you come to be a coach? People might think that sort of person, you must be a different person now, right, than when you were a younger man.
Yeah, well, hopefully people can see, like, obviously you have your change in your personality, right? And you grow up, you mature. I was like, 19, 20 years old. And like how it was back then was like we were on our own right. Like it was just if we weren't eating, you were gonna get eaten up, right? So I think I made up this, just get out of there, don't take any bullshit. And also I was an emotional kid, to be honest. Also when I was playing, I didn't get any help. I don't think it was that bad, to be honest. As people like the reputation that I have, I was also.
You think it got out of control? People kept repeating
a lot of jokes as well. Yeah. Right. So, but yeah, as I grew up, I just like now it's just very obvious to me how a team dynamic should work, and I had my education as well in health and nutrition, where I also like talk with people and get really to know the persons and what they need to perform and improve themselves. So that's just how I matured, I guess, as a grown up.
Well, along those lines, then, one of the reasons I set the question up to ask that is because that is one component in the modern day of coaching that is actually a big deal. Like everyone now knows if teams lose or choke, get the sports psychologist, etc. But it's not just for that reason. Like we're talking about here, if people are like young and not mature, or someone's like, for example, someone's way of expressing themselves, maybe it doesn't go well with the way the group works or the dynamic. Like I've heard that's actually a thing that people use the sports psychologists for, and that team structures now care about. Whereas if you know this, even in CSGO a few years back, it was still just the players in the room, and if people argued, if there were people who chill, they would chill. Like, how would you say that component exists in the coaching world now?
I think it's very important. Like, also handling conflict within a team. And you have these 5 different players with 5 different personalities, and then you got to figure out as a coach like 5 different ways essentially to motivate these players. Like everyone needs to be happy, and that is a very difficult task. Also, now when players, I would say now they are getting more coachable, but like there's still a lot of players like who probably like they're not used to a coach. Just even though there's been coaches for like a couple, decent amount of years. It's not like football where you get into a team at a young age and you're just getting coached, right? So it's also a bit about the mentality, I think. But definitely all these things with the team dynamics and how the players respond to criticism and open feedback and dialogue and things like that. Because otherwise, it's just gonna go downhill if you cannot manage to do these things.
When you mention that,
with the pressure as well.
One thing I would say as an outsider is it's funny, right? Because I think too many people who aren't from the Nordic region do that stupid thing. I mean, you see it when they think that you can all just speak each other's languages, which isn't really true. But they all think that like Swedes are just like Danes, or like Norway. It's like they're really not. But the worst one to me is when they compare Swedes and Danes, right? Because they look at the Swedes. You think about when like Fnatic was winning everything in 1.6 and in CSGO. They do just look like the most boring guys ever. They're all just sort of like, well done, good. Brah, and then they all just get up like, Like, not even a massive celebration, just like high five and then go back to drink water and go to bed, right? They actually are like that, guys. That's not even a meme. Whereas the Danes, people don't know, because of the structure and sort of the sporting approach a lot of the teams have taken and the tactical aspects, right? Yeah, there is a lot of like, it seems like, oh, it's a really great machine that fits together. The players all operate. And usually people know like Karrigan and his teams seem like they have a great spirit. People know the great Astralis lineups. People think they're friends because they won a million tournaments, by the way. That'll make you really be friendly with people. But I actually always get the feeling people don't know. Behind the scenes, I've heard in Danish teams, people can be mad spicy, mate. People are arguing about stuff. People are upset with their role. Like, I've heard it's not as lovely as people think. So on that aspect, people might be shocked when they hear you say like the idea of like, oh, even to resolve conflict, or I would say this, a great way of saying it is you can say to mediate conversation. You know, sometimes people directly wouldn't have a lot of success getting their problems through each other. But if you have someone there to sort of help them explain, no, what he means is this, you know, is that a big component in teams?
I think it's way worse in like the lesser teams, to be honest. I think when you're at this high level in Astralis, for example, like you're not allowed to behave like that.
Right.
Of course, also you have the coach and the sports director, whatever, and the management. It's very serious, and then the players know it's serious business. But they still have their personality and they still have their opinions and stuff like that. But sometimes it's can still like get a little hectic, but like we focus a lot on like conflict management and stuff like that. So I don't think it's that much. I guess it depends on the players, right, and the team, and how much the team is actually being managed by the coach and how much impact they have, right? Because in lesser teams, if the coach doesn't have anything to say, really no impact or authority, if you have some players going crazy, I mean, it's not going well for you, right? So.
Right. One thing that's a concept that I actually thought was a really interesting one that I took from football was people I notice when a player's going to stop being a good player and try and become a coach or a manager, oftentimes what people look for now to see if they'll be good, because you just guess it otherwise, is what great managers did they work under? Who was their coach or whatever? So, for example, one of the players that everyone bigs up now is that Xavi Alonso guy, because obviously he was working with like Guardiola and Mourinho. He had like some of the best coaches ever in football. So people were like, he must be good. Next one. Is it implied because you had Ave as your in-game leader, Zonic obviously he's been around your career, etc. He's been a great coach. Like, was it implied like you do you think you took anything from these guys, or did you formulate your way of coaching and way of thinking about the game differently, separate from them? How was it?
I think definitely in some points, because it was probably more when I was a player, to be honest. Like when I got into M2W, it was something else. Like they were just great guys, really much more professional than my previous teams, and they were really fucking good, to be honest. Like that team, they were so smart and so clever. Like I loved playing on that team, even though we didn't manage to get to the heights we would have, but. Just being with Ave and Sonic definitely helped. But like as I grew up, I was away for a few years, just growing on myself, and I just I've always been quite a quick learner, to be honest. So when I see stuff or hear stuff like or people talking or how to get to know them, it comes natural to me. So yeah, with some good inspiration and some leaders, and with my own development, I think that's it.
Along those lines, there's another concept I remember hearing. It was a brilliant interview that Mourinho did, where what he tried to explain was like that your expectations for managers shouldn't just be like it's only the period they're the manager. Because he was talking about the idea that like in football there's heritage. So it's the idea of like what did you inherit from the team before you? Like was the manager before you a great manager? Did he have great players? Did he leave you players he developed, etc. Right? And so his concept was certain teams you go into, like if you're the next manager after really a lot of success, you might be in a position to have a lot of success. Meanwhile, if you're coming when they're rebuilding, it's going to be way harder, right? You're not going to win it immediately. In Astralis, obviously Zonic was a couple back. Ave was there in between after. Would you say in Astralis that you were in a position where the expectations were to win? Was it to be like the Astralis that could win majors? What would you say the expectations for you were? And what were your own expectations to be a coach?
Well, we set like a long-term view, right? Because when we get into a team, and they've also been on like this rebuild for quite a long time now, so they know also like we cannot expect us
right
to go in and win. But like the public are always expecting us to
sure.
win. So there's the pressure without really shouldn't get the pressure. But so we just made a long-term goal instead. When do we want to reach these goals, get better, get all the maps in, and then we can start competing in let's say 6 months or whatever. So it was not winning, but improving with the lineup we had and see how far we could take it. What's the second question? I forgot.
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, what I would say is I'll spin it into this question. How about this then? So when Zonic was there and he won all those majors and all those tournaments, right? To be fair, from what I know, that was actually before even the first part of it, before even some of the people who now run the Astralis project, especially in Counter-Strike, were even there. And in fact, if you go back, some of that was just the days where it's like 5 players plus a coach. That's about all you do. And you only really contact the org for stuff like tickets or a boot camp or something. It's not like a whole sports division like it is now I've heard in Astralis and a bunch of other orgs. So one thing I wondered was a lot of what happened, are there things left over, for example, in Astralis, like structures that Zonic set up or anything like that? Or was it more like he was just working with the team and something else has been done since then?
I can't talk specifically about Sonic because I've never been told like, oh, this is what Sonic did or he did exactly. Or a few things, but nothing in particular. So I don't know how much work he did. But obviously, the game changes all the time, and in the span of like 2 years or whatever, the game changes a lot. So I didn't really feel like that. There was still a lot of things that was like in the clouds to say whatever. Like we didn't really know, or we tried to figure a way how to proceed with the team and how we could do it in the best way with the players we had at the time. So it was all new basically. It wasn't like there was not this, foundation. It didn't feel like it. It was kind of being developed, by Ave, and then I got in. So it was a bit hectic.
Right. One thing that I find quite interesting is I notice fans, because most of the times when fans say stuff about like strats or tactics, they're just guessing, mate. Like, they really do just play matchmaking and go to the same spot and have the same aim duel. They've just heard that it makes them sound smart if they sound like they know what they're talking about. But I've noticed the area that shows to me that they don't really is they obsess over the idea that tactics, especially from a coach, is inventing new things or breaking the meta or something and like doing some like brand new smoke no one's seen or a new boost or something. Whereas to me, one of the things I actually find beautiful about Counter-Strike and a lot of sports is maybe at the highest level when the two best teams in the world play, there's so many factors everyone's got checked off in the boxes that maybe then it is about some unique matchup he does or something. But I would say most of like what it appears to me about how Counter-Strike teams are on coaching are principles that existed in your day. It's things like, are we a team that relies on trade fragging? Do we use a lot of utility to get in the site, or do we let like the aimer take the fight or something? How do we use our lurker? Do we want to do an up-tempo game? Do we want to do more of a slow passive? Like a lot of these concepts actually are quite basic. It's just that they're basic to understand, but to actually implement is quite hard. Like to get people, if they watch Heroic, they're amazing at trade fragging, but they didn't just do that coming out the womb. I guarantee they've worked on that a lot and they've figured out like who does what and the timings and they've put it into play. What do you say about that? Like Counter-Strike can be a very simple game too, right? It's hard to master.
Yeah. That's true. It's also like there is so much work to do as a coach. It's also almost impossible to do alone. That's also why Astralis hired 2 now, right? Because you cannot do all these things. And obviously you need the players as well to chime in. Like everybody needs, and then it's the coach's responsibility that everyone does their job and figure out new things. Because in this day and age, like the game is so fast. Like players know how to take space so quickly. Like if you are just waiting for 1 second or 2 seconds, the space is gone, right? You might construct a round, and if you don't take that space within 1 second, like the main purpose is already over in the round. So players have to learn this and when to do it, and it's extremely difficult because it's so fast paced. And like players react so quickly nowadays, especially Heroic with their counterintuitive or approach aggressive style. So they're just all over the map, and you have to like really take the space. So it is a lot of these. I'd say fundamentals is still really difficult because there's so much happening. Like you might go around off like one step or one information. That there might be a little chaos in the other team when we do this, and then we do something else. And there's a lot of that stuff also. Like so it's not. It's hard to like sit and find some crazy smokes. Of course, you have to do it, but it's really time consuming in comparison to what else you can achieve.
Along those lines, actually, one thing I did want to ask you about the process of coaching in a team like Astralis is when we used to have the old circuit where it really was like every 2 weeks there was a LAN, and sometimes it was like a LAN into a LAN into a LAN, and you just do a round trip of like a Asia or America or whatever. When you had that sort of a schedule, it was the case that every coach used to say there isn't even enough time to do the demos. Basically, what you do is if your game ends at like 9 p.m. and you're playing the game at 2 p.m. the next day, like, first of all, you've got to have some sleep, and then you probably watch, 5-6 demos of the maps you think that they might pick. You figure out a few things, but you don't have like 2 weeks or whatever. Right? In the modern day, in theory, you could go sometimes, if you got 2 weeks before, you could watch every demo. So how do you divide up? Like, how much is it like scouting an opponent? How much is things like just looking for tendencies, or how much is working on your team? Like, how would you say you divide up the labor of being a coach?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff. Let me see if I can get it down. But yeah, first of all, no time. It's really difficult. Let's say if you have the match the day after, you have to like figure out and balance if you wanna, if you want to watch the game or not. Because if you don't have time, you also have to prepare, and it's a lot of stress on the players. They have to be. We might prioritize that the players sleep well and they don't have so much going in their heads. But on the other hand, if you are getting smashed in a game and you're not watching it, you might go in and think, oh, we're bad on this map now. But if you take a look at the game, it's just really obvious, okay, we actually only lost because we made these 2 mistakes and then we had no money, and it's all good. And the players just have to visualize it and see it, and then they're, that's just an unlucky, a few rounds, small mistakes we need to correct, and then we're all good. Yeah, and then also with the preparation and game plan, I think it's really important here as a coach also because when there are so little time and the players have to remember so much, right? On all the maps, all the nades, they have to practice all the maps on the game day as well. So when you find stuff and tendencies and stuff, the thing I do is like, I'm really, thorough. I might find few things that I think is valuable to know. But not too much, and I have to be like, if it only happens like, let's say 70% of the time, I might not even bother telling them, because then they can remember 15 tendencies on a team. So I just pick out the ones I think are really valuable in the game, and then they have to remember those, and I expect that. Yeah.
Right, I'll give a funny anecdote to set this up, right? There's been teams where friends of mine, or people that like, not even public friends, but like coaches that are friends of mine as well, they were former legendary 1.6 players, and they've coached teams in CSGO. And when I've been around the team and them, like, social settings, having food, players, I thought they were joking initially, would sort of imply sort of like, yeah, but you don't really know what it's like to be at the pro level. And I thought they were just bantering. It was just sort of like, they mean sort of like, they're just doing like you're a boomer sort of thing, right? But then I realised, wait a minute, actually, no, if you think how old that player is, he actually never saw that guy play 1.6. So I've even a few times said to some of these players, like, you don't know what you're talking about. He was like one of the best in the world. You're just all right, mate. You're like an all right tier 1 pro, and he was like 4th best fucking player in the whole world. Like, in Astralis, do you think the players actually know who Trace was from 1.6? Did you ever have times where you could like give them like actual real advice, like, I know what it's like to be a pro in this way, or something? Were you able to have that kind of relationship?
Not like give advice in terms of being a pro, because some of the players have been there for so long, and they also had Sonic, so I think they got that part pretty good down. So, but yeah, in terms of course, they know I also played with Sipix, right, and also almost played with Glaive actually. So they knew me, of course, and it helps with the Also, you always have to prove yourself, right? I also got back. It doesn't mean necessarily I was a good player back then, and I'm going to be a good coach, or I can like learn from me or stuff like that. So I had to like put in some work. But definitely, I think there was quite a few things, also with the discipline as well, like how much I like to do things really, by the percentage as well, maybe even more than they did. So I think there was good amount of stuff that.
Do you mean in the game? Like, do you have a very strict style of how you want to play?
Not strict, but let's say, you're in a 4v1, right? And then what guy peeks, and they do like a Saiwu on you or something shit like that, right? 1v4. Yeah. And it takes a lot of discipline to like be the 4th guy alive who dies first, and he just hides. Just hide, mate. And then the round is secure. Like 1 out of 100 times, Saiwu's gonna do some shit, or Simple is gonna do some shit, right? but you're not going to notice it. You're not noticing in practice because it never happens. But at some point, it will happen. But it's so boring, right? To be a player and just hide all the time when the round is, 99.9. It's a one round, but at some point you're going to lose it. It's more like that. Because it hurts so much losing those rounds when it happens, and there's no point in like just screwing around and doing stupid peaks just because that round is over, basically. But we were still like, they're good players and they know. I just want to take it a tiny step further, even though it might sound a little bit, but I think it's a right approach, to be honest.
No, mate, I actually think you're onto something here. One of the things I always say, look, these are like small details. Like we say, a lot of the coaching things are bigger concepts, like just do this is the way we play the map. But I think these small areas are actually where a lot of even modern coaches don't apply this, mate, because as you say, it doesn't happen that often. Like another one to me that kills me is the classic one is in Counter-Strike, in our version of the game, obviously, like if after time as a terrorist, you didn't plant the bomb and the time runs out and then you peek and die, you get no money and you lose your gun if you get killed. The amount of pro players that do that peek on the box anyway, it's like, bro, you get like $300 for this kill. It's not worth it. There's one. And the other one, the classic one that every fan hates, is you have like some superstar player who's really amazing. Could be Zebo or something. And then you have the one where you've got one AK on the T side, and then it's just on your bad player, and then Zebo's got the deagle. It's like, these are like simple ones, but to me, these are the areas where if I was a coach, I'd go mad over that bit. Like, even though it sounds so small, it's like, it's just annoying, if you know what I mean. You want to get those things sort of how they should be, right?
Yeah, that's true. And also, like, with the strictness, it's not like you have to play passive and all that shit. Like, sometimes it's better to just double peek an eco player, whatever, and just as long as you do it together, right? But at some point, the round is secure, and you're just going to secure it, right? But it's not like playing defensive. It can also mean playing in the opponent's face and stuff like that. So there's a lot of layers to it, right? Just to mention that.
One thing I feel like must have been. I think people who are casual fans can't understand how difficult this is maybe you experienced some of it when you came back and tried the MTW comeback, is they don't know compared to the old days how insane online Counter-Strike is. Like back in your day, if you weren't already invited to the LAN, I mean, you'd get through the online qualifier, even if it was those IEM seasons, like nearly every top team would get through. There'd be the one that maybe got upset by some like second German team or something. But in the modern day, dude, I've seen if you're not in like the top 5 or 6 teams or the top 10 where you're guaranteed the invite to the tournament or you're the partner, if you go through those online brackets, dude, there's really good teams get knocked out in those. There's really good teams get knocked out in the BO1 part by a random team you've never heard of. And it's not like that team then goes on and wins the qualifier. That team just goes out in the next round. I've heard like that part's really hard because you can't prep for some of these teams. You might never play them again. And even the way they beat you might just be something like they just play rush Counter-Strike or they just have an AWPer goes crazy. What would you say that experience is like? Because I've heard when you're in that cycle of having to play all the qualifiers, it's really tough mentally because you don't know what more you can do as a coach. Sometimes there's lock elements composed of it, right?
Yeah, it's really difficult. Also the best of ones. But we also actually had to talk about it because you just have to change your mind on how to play in the game. Because when you're playing lesser opponents, like they're gonna do some crazy stuff. You don't know what they're gonna do, and you have to we have to change our style. Actually, even though it's not the best style, maybe we have to change it anyways, just to be prepared for this team. Because if we sit back, we might lose a duel because we're like looking at the radar, we're communicating too much, we're just sitting back too much. So I think we have to make like specific game plans for these best of ones. And even though you might, there's no reason to gamble as well versus these teams. Like, money is really important in these best of ones as well. Like, if you're going to go for a risky retake, just don't do it. Like, especially, you might want to do it against a tier 1 opponent, but if you're playing with a lesser team, there's no reason to throw all your cash away. Even if you might be the favorite, like in the round, you might be better off saving, because if you lose the round, you're going to get fucked. And that's, kind of counterintuitive in how you want to play the game. There's more aspects to it, obviously, but it's a different mindset you have to go through versus those teams, in my opinion. Right.
We're going to be careful how we ask about this, but you obviously got to coach at a major, PGL Antwerp, right? The results didn't go great. It wasn't like a great finish. We're not going to talk about the matches or whatever, but what was it like to actually get to coach at a CSGO major? Because I've heard for the people who worked in 1.6, etc., where the game wasn't as huge and not everything was I've heard it like a lot of people that they wish they'd had the chance to compete in this kind of a circuit and see what the modern day shit's like.
Yeah, it was a good experience. It was great. To be honest, I just enjoyed it. Right, not too many complaints. But it is just something different, right? It's great to be a part of. You know, in my day, the events weren't that big and all that stuff. The money was not that big, so it's just like huge. So many good teams as well. So much prestige, so much the feelings and the heartbreak every team goes through when they're out and how you cope with it and handle with it. It's just a great experience. So, personally and coaching wise as well.
Right, the main tournament I obviously want to ask you about was IEM Cologne. Like, even though in the modern day it's not a major, I always say this, there's the majors and then there's Katowice and Cologne. Those are like the events after that where it's like people do want to win these, like they want to win a major. People want to be in Cologne because it's the Lanxess Arena when you get to the playoffs. That's a big deal for people. It is like one of the legendary Counter-Strike arenas, and your team obviously had this top 4 run there, which was pretty big when you consider at the time the scene was still pretty good. Like a lot of top tip FaZe, Na'Vi were all still on top. We had some really good lineups. So on this run, your team had to beat so many of the bigger names. Like you beat the Furia team, Cloud9. You obviously played against like FaZe and Na'Vi, the 2 best teams. Like, what would you say about this run? Like, what were some of the factors that allowed it to happen? What was it like during it? Because obviously in your time period in Astralis, you didn't get the best players. You weren't like some team that was supposed to be top 5 or top 4. So I wondered what allowed this run to happen, do you think?
I think we just, we had some trouble with consistency and, maybe the individual level across the board. And at this point, I just think, every player just chimed in a little bit more than it used to. Because I think we did well with what we had. And we also, like, when we were playing, we also won a lot of practice. Not that it matters, but we could feel it when we were playing well. We played it actually pretty well, even though we were getting bashed by the media for like a year straight because we're Astralis. I think we had some good matches. People are just expecting so much from this team, no matter what. But when we're looking back at our games and watching how other teams played, I actually think it looked pretty decent compared to a lot of teams. So we just had a nice run, some good plans, and everybody just chimed in. Unfortunately, we lost the game to Na'Vi. It was the end.
I mean, if people don't know, there was one map there, the second map, where it was like overtime, and in that scenario, you just want to see the third map. You want to see what would happen if we just got to play that last map, right?
Yeah, it was a tough one. The T-side Mirage at that time it was a tough one. It was a fun game, though. It was a tough one, to be honest, because it's always like you feel you are throwing the game right when you're on the head, but you're not really throwing it because you're still on the weaker side on the Team Mirage. There was a lot of insane CT sides at that time, like some really bangers. So we knew it was going to be difficult, and we just couldn't manage to pull it off. It would have been fun, but also like you never know what would have happened on the third map. But I guess we got a good end to it anyways. The map intense one.
True. Right. Obviously, this is also the time period when Simple was still really good. I think he was still considered like number 1 player in the world. What's it like to coach against a player like that?
Yeah. Well, there's not much to do, right? You can see how he plays, see what he likes to do the most, and then it's just, don't get into these where he can be the hero, right? Use plenty of utility. Don't lose entries. Try to get down to a point where it's just, the trading. Don't let him get in spots where he's like behind the box and he can do his things. Shoot one, get back, get another kill, then you're toast, right? So you have to get through that first part of the map or the round in order to handle it. But it's just there's not much to do. Right? When he pops off and the things he does, it's hard to coach against. You can never do all you want to do because you have so much other things to worry about as well. But
you also at this tournament got to play against FaZe, who obviously won the event and at the time with the number 1 team. What is FaZe like to try and play against? Because I imagine, it's funny, people will think it's the team with like Ziwu or Simple that's the most scary to play with the one player that goes crazy. But I always thought the thing with the FaZe team is they have so many good players. Like, what do you even do against a team like that? Like, how do you match up?
Yeah, well, you have to outplay them, right? That's what you got to do. I think they were probably also maybe more individually skilled back then and that they are now. I'm not sure. Like, I'm I'm not so good with the timelines as you are, but like at the time right now, I think like many teams are actually competing with FaZe, also with the firepower. I don't know, or the tactical wise, but yeah, at that time is like you can't really go to a weak spot. You can go to Karrigan or whatever, but he still shoots people, and you cannot do your game plan around that anyways. So it's dangerous playing against 4 huge players fracking wise. Maybe Rain is a bit on and off, but he's still a very strong player. So it's hard going into that game for sure, but it was actually a pretty close one if I remember correctly anyways. And we also, no, that's not the round where we lost to Brokey. No, but yeah.
What about this then? As you mentioned, obviously Karrigan's the in-game leader of FaZe, and in CSGO, he's a legendary in-game leader. Everyone's going to think of him this way. But back in the day, not only did you play with him in CSGO and CS 1.6, but he wasn't at all the IGL back then, if people don't know. Like, he was actually a guy, I mean, it's funny because his personality is so different from what he, like, appears as an IGL now. Like, he wasn't the captain figure. He was the guy who was a bit of a troll. Like, dude, he used to bring that fucking football rattle to games. I used to tell people, admins, get him the fuck out. That's really annoying, even us. Like, just working behind him, like he was a guy in the game who liked to AWP, etc. Is it strange to see that he's just completely changed his career? He's become a completely different player and figure, right?
Well, I wouldn't say strange. Like it's impressive. I also made the tweet right that he was just a monster back then. But again, it's more strange to me though when people are like comparing grown-ups to like when they were teenagers, and like you cannot understand like people are grown up and being adults. It's like maybe you are not, but other people are. So, but it's impressive what he's done. But of course, I've seen him at LANs, and I've also been on the team with him, and he was a completely different person back then, as was I. Definitely not the leader, but he's gotten that into his game. He learned that by the years, which is just an impressive task.
Right. Obviously, in the modern day, by the way, just so people know, this isn't an interview where we're going to like tell all the secrets. It's not that type of an interview. In fact, Trace is someone where he doesn't want to flame people. He doesn't want to tell you what's bad about the play. You figure it out for yourself. You watch them, you decide what it is. But I would ask this question. It's obviously a topical one, right? It's one thing if you just get a team. Like, for example, FaZe is a great example. Every player in that team is a veteran. Every player in that team has like been in big tournaments. They've been deep into some of them have won the best tournaments in the world. Some of them have been the best players in the world. That's a different thing that you're dealing with if you're there. That's like being Pep Guardiola and having the best players and figuring out, right, how do I make them win everything? There's a different type of team, which is when it's a rebuilding team or it's a team trying to develop players. When you bring in pieces into a team, it's not as simple as like, right, he knows how to play the game totally and just leave him go. You know, sometimes you're guiding them like, well, how are you going to do your role? How aggressive are you going to be? And if you're the AWPer, are we going to base the whole game around you? Or do you freelance a bit? Or maybe you're the supportive AWPer in some teams I've seen where they don't get much utility and they hang back a bit, right? When you're working with younger players, what would you say the challenges have been?
Obviously the experience plays a huge role, and also in the absolute like elite tier level of Counter-Strike now, you have to be really good at taking initiative in the rounds. I'd say a couple of years back, you didn't have to be this. You didn't have to react so fast, and also the players on the extremities of the map, they didn't have to do as much as they do now. In my opinion, they have to be in much more control. The in-game leader cannot take the decision for you when you're playing. You have to do it yourself. Because as I said, when the opening is gone after 1 second, you have to do it, and then they cannot micromanage everyone. So the experience and like also the knowledge of how to actually, play the fundamentals well with these young players, and then also the personality stuff, right? How to fit in a team. It's not guaranteed that they will, all the players are easier manageable in a team, but you might be if you're an up and coming young star, right? I didn't have an up and coming huge star with personality issues yet, but that might also be an issue.
Right, I will ask about a couple of players. So what I would ask is that one player, obviously he's a massive name, is Config. Right, this is a player where there's a reason years and years ago I even did like an open letter to him where I just tried to explain to this guy, like, you fucking your career up, mate. Like I've heard from all your teammates, your skill level is unbelievable. People even used to tell me, by the way, who've played with like devices, etc. Like, mate, Config's probably the best aimer I've ever played with. Like, what would you say the strengths of Config are? If you have him in your team, how do you try and use a player like Config?
Yeah, that's a good question. But first of all, he's very strong player, very high impact as well. Very aggressive. He's good at taking space, doing stuff, doing the things he likes. He plays on intuition as well. He does what he does. Good at taking space, good at talking. He's good at map control as well. He can do quite a few things in my opinion actually. But he's best when he's out. Getting those duels, getting him in favorable positions. Where he can do his stuff. In my opinion. But he can do quite a bit, to be honest. And he's really strong. Like Aima, he's really fast as well. Also talks well, and he's a charismatic guy as well, which also helps.
Right, along similar lines then, I would say a player in your team that actually has been flamed a lot. It's funny because he used to get bigged up a lot when he was in complexity, is Blame F. Because the problem is the stats are always amazing. So people have to think, right? It's a simplistic way of thinking, but people think like, but if you're that good, then why isn't the team, win the tournament or win all things? Like, I would just say, it's probably a player I'll do a piece of content about because I've heard a lot of different things behind the scenes from teammates and coaches, some negative, some positive. And essentially, it sounds like in some ways he's like the total opposite to Config, like you're saying there. Like, it sounds like he actually plays passive, but that's his game, and he like just trying to like break the game down and look at demos and stuff. So he has his own ideas of when the timing's at. Well, how would you explain how to use a player like Blame F? Because clearly the stats imply like he can get a fuck ton of kills.
Yeah, he can. Honestly, I think he can be used in more ways. You have to use him at least so he's getting the duels he wants, because he's also really strong. You also seen on the new guard, for example, like he always gets his kills. He's very good at getting in favorable positions for himself, also CT overpass, for example. But he can also be used like, I think we also did it like change some position up at the time where he's more in position, so he can actually do some entry kills because he doesn't mind it. Like maybe what people don't know or don't think, but it's also like where is he put and how is the team around him and how does the round work? And then he is just a bit, passive by nature, but he can, and he also likes to, take some space and do some entering actually. So I think you can work him out in more roles than that, like say. But if he's just doing nothing for the whole round, I don't think that's the right approach for him. Honestly, we also had some kind of a mixing up on some maps because if you have Blame F in a role where he's not doing anything in a round, it doesn't feel right because he's got such a good grasp on the game and what happens in the round, and you want to have this guy also in positions where he can make those decisions for the team and also make maybe a secondary call to Glaive, and just being in position and do the entering if he feels like it, and just playing around him as well.
Right. One of the big mysteries for outsiders on the Astralis team is obviously that when they were at the peak and they won all the majors, it's hard to know who did what or how were their calls or how did they play, because they had such an amazing team and they basically won all the time. Like if I'm talking about like how did Glaive call, it's like, well, I know things about Device that he does like uniquely, that the way he might play with the AWP, etc. So like that's not all just Glaive. Zonix called the best coach ever, so that can't only be Glaive did that. You had Dupree's probably one of the best entry players ever. You can see what I mean. Like Mega's amazing, like mid-round players. Like what you had him when none of these players were there. So what is Glaive's calling style, would you say? How does he like to see the game, and what type of a game does he want to call?
Oh, let me see. I cannot say too much, right? I cannot do the whole game plan.
No, just like the broad strokes, as we say.
Yeah, no, he can do basically most things. It's also it's almost always a team game, right? Like if we made the plan, we want to play like this. He can also change his style up. Players have opinions on what's best. But it is mostly this. I cannot talk for now, but we have to change some stuff, obviously. But structure with room for players taking initiative and just mixing the style up. But generally, defaulty, getting into the mid-round calls. The classic Danish Ray, right? But he's also good on the fly, as well. Calling mid-round. A bit like Ave, actually, to be honest. A little bit from what I remember back in the day.
Is he someone who, like, there's some IGLs, they like to go off, like, feel, like, Karrigan's more like this, more like the feel, and maybe they study the opponent more just so, like, they have an idea of, like, right, I may be able to throw something in there later on in the game. Is Glaive someone who wants to, like, study the game of, like, literally, these are, like, their rounds, and we're going to anti-strat stuff? What's he like in that sense? What's his mentality?
Well, obviously he also goes by his feeling, right? But you have the information on the opponent, and he decides, okay, how does he wanna approach it, and he remembers it in the game. But he is thorough when he's looking at demos, and he's got a good idea what's going on in the game, and then his brain just goes to work, and he calls what he thinks is best.
What about when you have veterans in a team, especially, I've always thought, right, there's a weird thing in Counter-Strike people might not know. Aside from Dupree and Zonic now, most times when people win the majors, after that team is done, they don't come back and win the majors after that. Like the Fnatic guys didn't, the NIP guys didn't, the Brazilian guys didn't. And one of the reasons why a casual fan might not know, it's not that they didn't have skill or they couldn't be a pro anymore. It's things like either they got a bit stuck in the way of thinking what they got them to the top before and they don't know that's outdated, or everyone else learned that from them, from losing to them. Or I would say the other aspect is having too much success. I mean, you can maybe relate to this as a pro when you were a player. If you're always in the semis and the final, sometimes you start out a tournament and it's almost like you don't be diligent enough early in the tournament in the first games that can get you eliminated, because you're sort of thinking like, right, okay, we're gonna get past that, get to the quarters, and it's like you almost like don't take the same diligent approach or whatever. What would you say with veterans? Is this a challenge as a coach to keep them on track at the idea that, like, when we might be starting in the online qualifier in the next tournament, we're not even in the top 8?
Yeah, but I don't think it's a challenge. It wasn't a challenge for me in that particular way, because the pressure was so high, and we weren't. We managed to break the number 3 and 4 in the world, and 8th or 9th or whatever. But we still had a long way to go. It felt like so. We still expected more from ourselves, and we still wanted to win. There was no complacency from the guys, and there's still a lot of tournaments, and we wanted to do well. We were under a lot of pressure, so we had to do well, right? It was not like we was like, oh, there's a new tournament, we can just do that. It was just full focus all the time. But like, if you're on a winning team for many years, I guess this, you can get full, and it's just the same over and over again. But for us, I didn't feel that was a way. The players were hungry, and we really wanted to do well. But like, of course, if you've been on the top for 10 years, 15 years, at some point you're gonna probably, slack a little bit, and it's just not the same fire. Some players can have it, like Karrigan, for example, but it's really rare to have the same, passion, and you want to put the same hours into it. Also, when you get a dog, get a girlfriend, maybe children or whatever.
What would you say? Because you referenced it there, like in your team, it doesn't matter what the players are. Everyone's expectation is Astralis has to be number 1, or there's problems. Like someone's going to have to be fired, or some players should be replaced, or what are they doing? Like you say, the media pressure is enormous. Even when the team is at times when they're not as high ranked, or you're bringing in newer players, or there's older players coming back. How do you deal with that within the team? Like I always got the vibe, even at their peak in Astralis, if they felt like everyone was criticising them, it was almost like it's us against the world approach or something. What was it like in your time? Could you sense that everyone was putting pressure on you out externally?
Definitely. It's a huge thing. You can just feel it. Like you also talk with other players as well. Nobody, honestly, nobody gives a shit if I'm gonna just say Mouse now. It might sound fucking stupid, right? But like, if Mouse does badly in a tournament, there's not gonna be any. It's just. They're just a good team, but they don't have like that Astralis hype, right? So it was just every game we lost, we're just getting shit. But we just, what you got to do is just, live inside the bubble. We don't care about what anyone says about us. We're just trying to get better, and we're gonna do our best at tournaments. That's our approach to it. Don't take any notice of what people are saying, because we have the info right here. We're seeing what we're doing wrong and stuff like that, and it's just just play as professionals and don't give a fuck about the social media. But it was obvious, and it also impacted the players. Like it's almost inevitable that the pressure gets to the players, because you see it everywhere you go on the internet, and you see it every time you just open up whatever. It's something about Astralis because it is Astralis, even though we were so far from what they were when they won 4 majors.
Right, obviously, this is one of my last questions. This is going to be a trickier question to answer if you can't flame anyone and you don't want to go too much on any secret details. So I'll just ask it like this. Trace isn't done coaching and isn't done in CSGO. I mean, you've even changed your Twitter name to CS2, so obviously you're not done, right? In this scenario, the question is this. What are your aspirations to coach again? Would you want to coach again soon? Do you actually think, in general, you were a good coach?
Yes, obviously I'm looking to coach again. Also, I'm just looking at my opportunities, right? Whatever comes, it might also be like an assistant role at some team. Whatever I feel is the right path for me. You can also always develop as a coach and learn new stuff. That's also part of my end goal. I want to be the best coach I can be. And that might be another road than just getting on a team. But I definitely think I am ready. Also, when I've seen and heard stuff as well.
Were you a good coach?
Yeah, I believe so. It was, there's so much you have to do as a coach, right? You have to, have communication skills. You have to being able to, effectively communicate with your team members, provide clear instructions, constructive feedback, develop all the players, understand their strengths and weaknesses, and the goals of the players. Then you have to do the practice and make sure that, they do their practice routines and how you do in practice. And then you also have to help them psychologically, even though many teams have, a sports psychologist and stuff like that. You're still on site with them. And, in the middle of the game, it's you who have to also fix the team morale, help the players deal with the pressure and the stress, and just scheduling as well. But of course, I learned a lot as well when I was there. I'm no means perfect, no one are. But I think I definitely have the capabilities. I'm good at fitting in and seeing, how I can contribute to a team and what's wrong. And then just, understanding the dynamic of the team. You have these 5 players. And you also have to compromise as a coach, right? You cannot just come in and think, I'm going to be the only boss here, because then you're going to have unsatisfied players. Even though there might be, some areas of the game where I think we have to do this or you have to do this, and I'm just going to go bananas if you don't. If you have 4 players who are not willing to do that, I cannot just say, okay, you're off the team. It's impossible. You cannot do that. So you have to also find these compromises on the issues that wherever they may be, and then just figure out, how to get together as a unit and play the best CS possible with the players, because it definitely, you need help from the players as well when you're coaching, and you just need to be this one unit with the players and the coach and the management to make it all work, because otherwise you're also going to crumble. When the pressure hits and the bad results come, that's also where you're going to change your players and stuff if all these things and your job as a coach is, if you're not doing that properly.
Right. Obviously, we didn't just do this whole interview in Danish, so you do speak fluent English. I assume you're not only interested in coaching Danish teams, right? You'd be open to an international team?
Yeah, for sure. I'm open to anything, really. Of course, there are a lot of, things to do, but yes, definitely. Also international teams, whatever. I have experience with many people as well, so... Yeah, I can do a lot of stuff, and I'm just waiting for the right thing for me. Let's see what happens after the player break, right? But I think I'm a big contribution, to any team, really.
Just for the sake of my own interest and novelty factor, right? Is there a world where when CS2 comes out, everyone's going to play the game, everyone's going to grind it a bit. Is there a world where you might ever try doing a comeback as a player?
No. I can say that no, it's a way too demanding to being a player. Like, you still have to put in almost the same hours as a coach, also in your daily life, but it's just something else when you're playing. It's very difficult. Also now I'm up in age. I might still be good, but it would take so much time to be the pro I could been if I even wanted to. So that's a no. I think definitely my career path is a coach, and it suits me much better than being a player. That's also why I've taken that road, because I think it suits me well.
Right, at the end of this interview, do you have any final message for people, or do you want to thank or say hello to someone?
Just thanks to everyone who's supporting me and following my little road here. Also, guys from back in the days. Of course, thanks to the teams who brought me up and had me as a coach, and all the players. I learned a lot from each and every one. People along the way I met. That's it.
All right, Mangatak.
Selv tak.
As Mary J. Blige said in her track, All I Need, you're all I need to get by, which is the case for me and my Patreon community who support this channel and these videos. Some of them include Theogony, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Joseph Adcock, Tosh, Bot Pounder 420, Thooorin, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Yerka, and a special thanks always to the main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask a question in my regular video AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who upcoming guests are. Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content, or you want to take part in one of those longer esports discussions with me where we go all over the place. Well, if any of those grab your fancy, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Risk Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.